Mobile Suit Gundam. It's become one of the most iconic giant robot anime franchises. Sure, there were plenty before it, what with Iron Man 28, Mazinger Z, and Getter Robo, but while those anime series were more or less superhero shows with giant robots instead of capes, Gundam offered something different. Creator Yoshiyuki Tomino depicted a more realistic human war in which giant robots were more weapons rather than heroic symbols. The show blazed a new trail for this distinct form of mecha anime, known as the real robot subgenre, but it almost became a footnote in anime history. When it aired in Japan in 1979, the show didn't garner enough ratings and was cancelled before its 52 episodes could be completed, resulting in a rushed ending at 43 episodes. Despite the cancellation, popularity swelled to the point that Gundam found new life in movie theaters. The entire series was recut and partially reanimated as a 3-part movie trilogy in the early 1980s. And these movies were incredibly successful because they drew in huge crowds. And for being such a critical piece of anime history, it's worth looking into what these movies have to say about masculinity, and it turns out, quite a lot.
Launch Gundam immediately! The Federation has dispatched its entire Mobile Suit force.
1981's Mobile Suit Gundam, the movie, launches straight into the conflict between Earth and the space colony, set in the futuristic timeline of Universal Century 0079. After a brief introduction to the war between the Earth Federation and Zeon, the movie introduces us to Amuro Ray. As a teenager living in the space colony Side 7, Amuro pays little attention to the evacuation orders, more focused on his science projects. It's only once his very good friend, Frau Bo, visits him that he takes notice. Without her, he wouldn't have eaten or evacuated. It's a good thing she intervened, otherwise Amuro would have been caught up in the crossfire of the infiltrating Zeon forces. Amuro's father doesn't speak much to him, given his work on the Federation's secret Gundam project. Amuro's dad reasons that it'll all be worth it to end the war. That said, he doesn't take into account how many people in the colony could be killed for harboring such a project. He doesn't listen to his son about the carnage, tuning it out as he focuses on the weapons. And all of this goes down amid Zeon's attack on the colony, in which Amuro witnesses many people die, including Frau Bo's family. Although reluctant to pilot the Federation's Gundam mobile suit, Amuro forces himself to do so for fear of losing more of his friends. So he quickly studies the schematics, jumps into the cockpit, and starts obliterating Zeon's Zaku mobile suits. Now, even though Amuro takes to piloting the Gundam rather quickly, the movie never makes him 100% comfortable with war. It's not like he just blew up some soldiers and was like, yeah, this is going to be my career now, I'm a natural. Amuro was tossed into this situation out of desperation amid the war. Brash decisions made by older positions of authority have forced him to become a soldier. That lack of choice is stressed by the other allies that Amuro comes to know on the escaping white-based starship of the Federation. Bright Noah is fairly young and isn't experienced enough to captain the white-based ship, but an unfortunate death forces him to do so. The small and young Hayato views himself as inferior to Amuro, but still commits to piloting the gun tank because it needs a pilot. Kai is one of the most reluctant, cowardly, and snarky members of the crew to pilot the gun cannon, but again, the Federation needs him due to lack of pilots on the white base. I like to think of Kai as a personification of that annoying audience member who questions everything on a detached level. You know, like the guy who would say, well, I would do this when somebody in a movie makes a mistake while refusing to acknowledge the emotions surging through that scene that would allow for such an error. Kai usually has some mean commentary, but almost always gets told to shut the fuck up by whoever is in earshot. He's the character I love to hate. So all of these men have very little experience in war and are forced into assuming these military roles for their own survival. And while they do their best to keep all of the refugees on the white base alive, they still endure plenty of psychological pain when it comes to being thrust into this conflict. The same goes for the women. Sayla, a med student, becomes a communications officer and later a pilot. Mirai does have some piloting experience, making her an ideal choice for helming the white base, but she also has to pull double duty as essentially a mother figure for the crew. This takes the form of both critiquing the inexperienced Bright and his interactions with his crew, and caring for the younger war orphans aboard the ship. In this regard, Mirai is one of the more capable and collected figures aboard the white base, and she's thankfully given more depth beyond a relationship with Bright. Now, of course, the opposing Zeon forces have their fair share of ego problems. So much of what makes Zeon fail amid their assaults on the Federation and the Gundam is their desire to be the best. The premature assault on Side 7 went ahead only because one soldier wasn't willing to wait and really wanted a promotion. One that he never got. The best pilot among the Zeon is Char Aznable, aka the Red Comet. Known for his speedy Red Zaku and combat skills, Char is cunning enough to consider the best approach for attacking the white base and the Gundam. Additionally, he's known for his facial concealing mask and his Darth Vader style helmet. And much like Darth Vader, Char also has a family secret that he conceals throughout the movies. So yeah, Char is a lot like Darth Vader, although Gundam came before The Empire Strikes Back and the revelation that Vader is Luke's father, so this is more of a happy coincidence, unless of course you want to make the case that Star Wars stole from Gundam. Now, the stoic nature that Char holds is a facade as concealing as his very mask. He doesn't fall for the Principality of Zeon's pitch for supremacy. The Zeon forces, led by the Zabi family, push the idea that they are the master race, superior to those on Earth. The associations with the Nazis should be pretty evident. Char, however, is intelligent enough to not only deceive the Federation, but also Zeon. This is made clear in the second act, when Garma leads the attack on White Base once it arrives on Earth. And although Char and Garma were once friends, Char misleads Garma into attacking the White Base and ending his life. Not only does Char's plan work, but he also mocks Garma over the radio, telling him to blame his lineage for his misfortune and laughing at his demise. Now, it would be easy to cheer on Char's laughter at the slaughter of this brash young man born into royalty, but Garma's death is bittersweet. Before he is gunned down by White Base, the character is given some depth. Right before Garma leads his final assault, he is seen speaking to his girlfriend, Iselina. He plans to marry her and is willing to renounce his role within Zeon if his family does not accept this marriage. When Garma is killed in combat, Iselina is heartbroken. Something that I wish was kept in the movie from the original TV series was the scene where Iselina attempts to get revenge for Garma and ends up getting herself killed in the process. It's so tragic and really showcases the horrific byproducts of war. Another aspect that made Gundam so unique was that Zeon wasn't portrayed as cartoonishly evil. Many of the soldiers are portrayed not as mindless stormtroopers, but soldiers, many of whom will abide by leaving civilians out of the crossfire. And even when they are violent and aggressive, there's still some humanity to them. One of the movie's best scenes is when Amuro is reunited with his mother. After finding his childhood home empty, Amuro recalls leaving his mother at an early age when he and his father departed for the space colonies. Amuro later finds his mother working at a refugee camp just outside Zeon territory. Although his mother is happy to see her son, she is horrified when he attacks and kills investigating Zeon soldiers. She doesn't want to see her son as a murderer and can't accept how easily he justifies killing another person. The dark thoughts of being abandoned by his mother only intensify after this. War has changed Amuro, as it would change any young man forced into such a position. Amuro has become a man that his mother no longer recognizes, and they part ways bitterly. Although Amuro is changed by war, he's still critical of the Federation forces that he fights alongside. There are numerous scenes where he encounters harassing and violent Federation soldiers who abuse their power. He recognizes the futility of war pretty early in this movie, as when he refuses to pilot the Gundam after so many missions. Bright has no useful words to convince Amuro to get back in the Gundam, so he beats him, and it still doesn't work. And it isn't another soldier that convinces Amuro to continue the fight, but Frau. She tells Amuro that White Base needs a pilot, and that if he won't get into the cockpit, she will. Realizing Frau wouldn't be able to handle the Gundam and likely get herself killed, Amuro returns to the fight. There's no point to fighting if there isn't somebody to protect, somebody that you care about. But even after being convinced to fight, Amuro still overexerts himself. He later finds himself exhausted and psychologically damaged when going back into combat. The war still changes him even when he insists that he's fine. There's so much that Amuro has yet to learn at such a young age. Consider how he begins to become infatuated with the Federation officer Matilda. Like a lot of the young men, Amuro is attracted to her. It's an attraction so strong that he can't see how much it hurts Frau Bo. He's oblivious to her feelings, still too inexperienced to process how to express love or sympathize with women. In the film's final act, Amuro faces off against the older Zeon pilot Ramba Ral and his girlfriend Haman, who is always by his side. And when I say Ramba Ral is older, well, okay, first, just look at this image of Ramba Ral and just take a guess how old you think he is. Look closely, notice that he's gained some weight and is a little gray in the hair. Have you guessed? Do you have your guess for how old he is? Are you ready? You ready to hear it? He's 35. Yeah, there will be more on Ramba Ral in the next movie, but there's a good stopping point with Giranzabi's big speech to Zeon. He weaponizes Garma's death as an inspiration to continue the war, rather than stop the loss of life. As Giran makes the announcement, Amuro watches, holding Frau's hand. Initially, Amuro is amazed by this display, but is corrected by Bright that this is a dangerous route to pursue. Amuro is still young and has much to learn about the world, and it's much harder for men to grow when they're surrounded by a conflict like this.
The enemy started evasive action.
Attention, emergency. Attention, emergency.
1981's Mobile Suit Gundam 2, Soldiers of Sorrow, begins by introducing Zeon's General M'Quve. Obsessed with antiquity, M'Quve doesn't share Char and Ramba Ral's taste for conflict. He's hoping that Ramba Ral will intercept the White Base so he doesn't have to get his hands dirty while still taking all the credit. Ramba Ral, however, is willing to go along with this attack because he believes it will benefit his men and his married life. Destroying the White Base and Gundam will mean an ascension in the ranks, which also means a more secure future for him and his wife. And it is rather unique that Haman is right there on the front lines, not just somebody back home waiting for her man to come home from the war. In essence, Ramba Ral and his wife are working together to ensure they won't have to keep engaging in dangerous, life-threatening combat. One character given much more to do in this movie is Sayla. Her encounter with Char has revealed that he may be her long-lost brother, and she needs some answers. She figures the only way to find info on Char is to get close enough to the enemy. This leads to her trying and failing to pilot the Gundam in combat. When questioned about endangering herself and the White Base, Sayla's excuse is that she wanted to prove herself, that she could pilot the Gundam as well as any man. And although this admission disappoints Bright, he does kind of accept it as an excuse. Sayla would rather be seen as an insecure woman than admit her potential association with Char. Unfortunately, her secretive tactics don't do her much good. Even when given a chance to ask a Zeon prisoner about Char, there is little info that she gets, considering that Char has been a little less present on the battlefield. But holding in those feelings doesn't do any good on White Base. Still angered by Amuro's insubordination, Bright speaks with Mirai about taking Amuro off Gundam piloting duties. Bright does recognize that Amuro is skilled, but isn't willing to wait for him to grow up mid-war. Overhearing this decision, a saddened Amuro departs in the Gundam. The hurt feelings of men and women not only drive the crew apart, but also endangers them. As Amuro ventures off on his own, he encounters Rambaral and Haman in neutral territory. Their meeting doesn't involve a debate on the politics of the war, but rather on questioning gender dynamics. For example, Haman takes an interest in Amuro's initial glances and offers to buy him dinner. Now, Amuro refuses this purchased meal, but much like Sayla, he doesn't admit that he can't accept food from the enemy. He instead brings up that it wouldn't be right for a woman to buy a meal for a man, a perceived view of gender that Rambaral finds rather amusing, that this youngster would be so old-fashioned. Amuro's cover is blown, however, when Frau Bo comes looking for him. But even when Rambaral admits that he knew he was speaking to the pilot of the Gundam machine that he's been fighting thus far, his opinion of Amuro doesn't change. He still admires the young pilot, even as he realizes that he may eventually have to kill him on the battlefield. But what's interesting about how Rambaral hides his feelings is that he does so to spare Amuro the embarrassment and intimidation of being recognized as a weaker man. Rambaral responds to Amuro more directly to ease the grip on the trigger for his concealed gun. He doesn't want to start a fight in neutral territory. That said, he will still track down Amuro after this encounter, and they will fight again, with Rambaral admitting you can't trust anybody in war. Amuro's inevitable return to the White Base results in his imprisonment. When Amuro insists that he's the only one who can pilot the Gundam, the crew shoots down his ego. Bright, Ryu, and Kai all argue that other pilots can handle the Gundam and that they don't need Amuro. The quickest way to emasculate a man who believes he is above criticism is to devalue their essential nature. It reduces Amuro to realizing it's not enough to be talented. Being a man means more than just being tough. And if that's all you got, you can end up like Amuro, locked in a cage, reduced to tears, realizing that you are not entitled to be a hero if you're not willing to accept the responsibility. That's why when Amuro is released from his cell during Rambaral's next attack, he doesn't jump into the Gundam, but instead defends White Base from within. During the attack, Amuro eventually relieves Sayla from piloting the Gundam, and Rambaral is defeated. Now, it is interesting how Rambaral fails in his attempt to infiltrate and destroy White Base. Everything seems to be going according to plan until he runs into Sayla. Overwhelmed with emotions while encountering this girl from his past, he's caught off guard and is injured. Rambaral blames himself for getting emotional over someone that he once knew. However, it's not his emotions to blame, but rather himself and what he has valued. And that's why Rambaral won't accept being taken in as a prisoner, despite the fact that White Base is willing to treat prisoners with suitable conditions. Rambaral decides to blow himself up, believing that he's doing what is right for Zeon. Someone like Rambaral may seem older and wiser to somebody like Amuro, but he's also far too beholden to serving a military cause. And instead of Amuro getting the revenge that he wants on somebody like Rambaral, proving how much of a man that he has become, that satisfaction is denied. Amuro doesn't take out a Zeon soldier who wanted him dead. He instead watches a man voluntarily destroy himself for a cause that wasn't worth it. Something that comes up more in this movie is the concept of new types. This was introduced in the first movie, but it's discussed in more detail here. New types are described as an evolution of humans with enhanced abilities and perceptions. So, the short explanation of new types is that they're Jedi. I mean, there's more to it than that, but given all the other Star Wars associations with this show, it's easiest to explain them as Jedi. Early in the movie, it's addressed that Amuro and Char are new types to explain why they're such expert pilots. The military takes great interest in new types, but mostly for combat purposes. They view this enhanced sense of perception more as a means of piloting than as a greater empathetic implication. Because following the discussion of new types, Amuro starts taking deaths a lot harder. One of the most horrific scenes he witnesses is Ryu sacrificing himself for Whitebase by crashing into Hamon's fighter. It scars him in a way that he can't just shake off these deaths as something that just happens in war. And it only gets worse after Matilda dies and Amuro has to meet her fiance, Lieutenant Woody, and you can probably guess what ends up happening to him. We additionally see how that lack of empathy becomes damaging, as seen in what happens to Kai. Throughout the movies, Kai has been cynical and uncaring. When the chance arises to leave Whitebase and the Federation, he takes it. But that lack of care for those he served only eats at him. He even harbors feelings for a Zeon spy, Miharu, which he covers up when she makes her way onto the Whitebase. Kai recognizes her tough situation with trying to make a living for her family, and the two start caring for each other. However, like many relationships in Gundam, this was not meant to be. Kai loses Miharu in combat, which damages him. And this jerk who cared for nobody now finds himself sobbing over another person, having denied these feelings for so long. Now, I enjoyed watching how much Amuro matures throughout this movie and wisens up quickly. A perfect example of this maturity is in his promotion from the Federation. Rather than being impressed with this new position and certificate, Amuro realizes how dumb this is. You watch your friends and coworkers die amid war, and what do you have to show for it? A new rank and a piece of paper? It's ridiculous, and Amuro is not afraid to call out the military for how little it does to honor Ryu with a promotion. And rather than offer sympathy, the Federation official handing out these promotions just gets angry and tells Amuro to shut up. There is no reward in war. The movie additionally introduces the newest addition to the Whitebase, Slager. Slager is far different from the rest of the crew. Whereas Amuro is small, thin, and emotional, Slager is tall, buff, and brash. He's boisterous, makes unwanted passes at women, and just comes on way too strong in a way that is not very welcome. But we'll get to more of him in the next movie.
The Gundam! Useless against it. Let's retreat!
1982's Mobile Suit Gundam 3 Encounters in Space is where the rivalry between Amuro and Char reaches its peak. With Char now in charge of going after the Whitebase, he realizes that he has to fight smarter rather than harder, given how much wiser Amuro has become. Having returned to space, the Whitebase makes a stop at the neutral space colony Side 6. It is here that Amuro and Char have their first face-to-face encounter, even if Char doesn't realize Amuro is the Gundam pilot. Now, Amuro recognizes Char because, well, look at him. There aren't a lot of Zeon pilots who look like this. They meet on the side of the road when Amuro's car crashes in the mud. Char, ever the gentleman, helps pull Amuro's car out of the mud. And making this encounter far more awkward is the addition of Lala, a new type protege/mentor to Char. Before this exchange, Amuro first encounters Lala alone while seeking cover from the rain. Now, Lala is far more in tune with her new type powers, finding the sadness in mortality and the joy of living. She represents the potential of new types, and there's a wondrous fascination that Amuro and Char have with this woman, beyond mere romance. Prior to this meeting, Amuro catches up with his father. His dad survived the attack on Side 7, but he's also lost his mind. He's entirely focused on the Gundam and on building modifications for it that don't work. He doesn't want to hear about his ex-wife or care about what Amuro has gone through. All he cares about is the giant robot he worked on. And to Amuro, it all feels like a waste. Another interesting relationship developed at Side 6 regards Mirai. Upon arriving at the colony, she is surprised to discover Cameron Bloom, her fiancé. Mirai doesn't have strong feelings for Cameron and views him as a coward for fleeing to neutral territory. Cameron is a wimp, especially when compared to the brash Slager, who is willing to beat up Cameron for Mirai's affection. But also smack around Mirai. Cameron and Slager are clearly vying for Mirai's affection. Of course, Mirai clearly has the strongest feelings for Bright, given his stern command and his treatment of her as an equal on White Base. They have a quiet conversation at one point, and it's pretty clear that they have a healthy love for each other, even if they're both shy about it. It's rather sweet, and it's enough to make you want to root for them to survive all this and fall in love. Because a lot of couples during this war don't. Case in point, Dozl Zabi. This dude seems to have everything. He has a towering presence, yet the most likable personality of anybody in the Zabi family. He has a wife whom he loves deeply and a baby daughter that he cares for. He also pilots the most massive mobile suit in the entire Zeon fleet, this gargantuan green monstrosity called the Big Zam. As if it's a surprise, this guy won't survive the war, and it's tragic, but it's also horrifying for Amuro to watch how hard Dozl dies. When the Big Zam is disabled, Dozl confronts the Gundam with a machine gun that can't possibly destroy it. This is one of the only high-ranking Zeon figures that I felt the most sorry for. Like, sure, I had some sympathy for Garma and his potential marriage, but he was still kind of an ass. Dozl, aside from serving the Zeon cause, embodies some positive traits of men. Dozl cares about his wife, his daughter, and his men, and he has maybe the best personality of the entire Zabi family. He additionally doesn't back down when he realizes he is not going to survive, firing at the Gundam until his last breath. It's what makes him so tragic. All that confidence, love, and fearlessness wasted on the war and the flawed philosophy of the Zabi family. You can see how terrible the Zabi family is with Daegwon's interactions with his son Gihren. In one of the movie's most intriguing conversations, Daegwon questions what Gihren recalls of the historical figure Adolf Hitler. All that Gihren seems to take away from history is that he'll succeed where Hitler failed with his obsession with genocide. And Daegwon is embarrassed that his son can't realize he's become a doomed fascist. But Gihren won't listen. He's too busy orchestrating his father's death to keep the war going, which later leads to Giren's sister Cassilia shooting him in the head to take over Zeon. She gets revenge for her father's death, which would explain why she takes a greater interest in Char, given how they have a lot in common. It's just too bad that she's still leading Zeon, so Char has to shoot her in the head. With a bazooka. As for Sayla, she finally gets close enough to Char in this movie for him to reveal the history behind them being brother and sister. He tells Sayla the legacy of their family's betrayal by the Zabi family and why he's trying to destroy them from within. He also wants to ensure that new types will not be weaponized so that Lala doesn't have to serve and Amuro doesn't have to fight him. Char has abandoned his past, and while he believes it's for the good of others, it still deeply affects those who love him. I additionally enjoyed how well Bright sympathizes with Sayla when he hears the truth. Bright has spent a good deal of time viewing Sayla as a competent member of White Base. So when he's the first to learn of Sayla's newly discovered association with Char, he doesn't spill the beans to the rest of the crew or directly confront her. He allows Sayla to tell him herself and agrees to keep her secret, building more trust between them. The relationship between Char and Lala is unique in how they're both trying to understand their new type powers. While Char will admit that he's only interested in Lala for her ability to sense the enemy's presence, Lala acknowledges this obsession as a flaw of men in general, while noting her integrity as a woman. She does love Char for more than just being the man who saved her life. That said, there is a strong telepathic bond between Amuro and Lala, a connection far different from the one that she has with Char. This creates a complicated love triangle between the three of them. And given the track record of the relationships in these movies so far, somebody is either going to get their heart broken or have their whole body blown up. And well, Lala gets blown up in the crossfire between Amuro and Char. Their conflict killed the woman they loved, igniting Char's fiery desire for revenge and forcing Amuro to look at the world more through Lala's eyes. Okay, so the connection between Amuro and Char is so strong that there's clearly something gay going on in their relationship, especially in their final duel, where they get incredibly close, like touching helmets at one point. This gay subtext has been admitted as much by Yoshiki Tomino in an interview with Hideki Anno. The interview does have Tomino being a little uncertain about how he wanted this relationship to proceed, but he absolutely didn't leave gay out of the equation. Quote, "I thought it would be good if maybe I could highlight these sensuous elements, to the point that you'd think, could Char and Amuro be gay? I think fiction writing is, more than anything, like I just said, about conveying that sensuality, having the audience pick up on it. If they can't, that's no good." There are a lot of romantic feelings that come out during the battles in this movie. Hayato's feelings of inadequacy after being injured sparks pity and love within Fraubo. Slager's final kiss to Mirai before dying in combat leaves her a tearful mess. Emotions run high, and the idea that there's nothing more going on beyond the cool space battles is absurd. Throughout the movie, there's a discussion about how new types are supposed to be a rebirth of humanity, a shedding of the old ways and evolving beyond what humans had become amid war. Lala uses her new type powers not just to fight, but also to peer into Amuro's mind and better understand him. The idea of empathy and becoming more aware of our existence beyond war and politics is what makes these Gundam movies so compelling. This isn't so much a battle over who gets to control the Earth and its resources, but about how humanity itself will progress to a level beyond the physical. Will men grow to be more questioning of what leads them down dark paths, or will they keep making the same mistakes? The final battle between Amuro and Char is a debate over Lala's death, the importance of new types, and how this conflict has molded them. The ultimate resolution for Amuro, guided by Lala's spiritual voice, is that he needs to live and use his new type powers to preserve life rather than destroy it. And he does. He telepathically communicates with the crew of White Base to clear the area as the final Zeon base explodes. It's a more optimistic approach to life rather than Char's lack of faith in humanity, which dooms him to seek revenge, but at a level that is almost frightening in its acceptance, to the point where he believes death would be favorable, if only to be with Lala again. And since I'm already talking about Amuro and Char's relationship, I might as well cover the final film in their rivalry.
Mobile Suit Gundam, Char's Counterattack.
1988's Char's Counterattack takes place in Universal Century 0093, set 14 years after the events of the One-Year War in the movie trilogy. Prior to this film, there were 2 Gundam TV series that continued the same characters, but I don't think they're essential to understand this movie. In fact, I think it might lessen the appeal. And it's not that I have anything against Zeta Gundam and Gundam Double Zeta. Truthfully, Zeta Gundam is my favorite Gundam show, but Zeta Gundam posed Char as more of a vindicated revolutionary, defending the space colonies against the Earth Federation's fascistic rise after Zeon's defeat. In Char's Counterattack, however, Char returns fully against the Earth as the leader of Neo-Zeon, a political shift that wasn't really covered in the Gundam sequel series. So going from Char dismantling Zeon's family rule with a nihilistic mindset of revenge on humanity to re-establishing a new version of Zeon that fights back against Earth under his rule doesn't sound like the biggest jump between movies. As Amuro tries to defend Earth, he is haunted by the visions of Lala, still stressing to him that she loves both Amuro and Char and desires that they not fight. There is some affection that Char has for Amuro in this movie, as when he seems to invite Amuro to follow him on horseback.
Amuro, I'm doing something extremely wicked.
Amuro pursues, and the two engage in a fight where they're so close that they might as well kiss. But as Char later describes it, those who are too much alike will end up hating each other. I mean, sure, they both have women in their lives as love interests in this movie, but they rely on them more for moral and technical support than passionate love. In addition to their physical and verbal fights, the film also showcases how influential Amuro and Char have become. For example, Quess is wooed by Char's words and runs off with him. We see Bright's son, Hathaway, taking ownership of Amuro's robot pal Haro, highlighting how he might be passing the burden of his experiences onto another generation. It's something that Amuro tries to address alongside Hathaway's concerns, while Char's gentler demeanor in developing new types enraptures someone as impressionable as Quess. These two men come to realize that they have a responsibility to others, yet they remain too focused on each other's ideals and don't fully grasp the new type civil war that they've ignited. The ending is incredibly revealing as Amuro attempts to push back the asteroid headed to Earth that will end humanity. While using all of his new type powers to push back that asteroid, Amuro continues to debate with Char on the merits of humanity and their own flaws. They bring up that Quess was seeking a father figure and that both of them failed to live up to that title. Char also admits that he viewed Lala less as a lover or protege and more as a mother. These men, with their families destroyed, who assumed roles in military and in politics, still ended up becoming flawed figures who failed youth. We see somebody like Hathaway remarking on how adults destroy so much of what they fail to understand or abandon everything to politics, and it deeply scars him. Yet Amuro makes the ultimate sacrifice, saving Earth and vanishing alongside Char. Now, Tomino was not 100% certain that Char's counterattack was how he wanted the saga of Amuro and Char to end. But that uncertainty does feel fitting for the movie's themes. The final scenes of Amuro and Char have them still discovering different aspects of their powers and parts of what makes them men. I really like that angle of men as a constant work in progress, where we are flawed but still capable of discovery and have to keep it going. We can't just settle. And it's that dynamic between Amuro and Char as these two figures just seeking love and trying to charge forward while stumbling along the way that makes them so fascinating. They're like some of the most interesting men in all of Gundam, beyond whether there's something gay going on between them, which, I mean, there is. You watch those movies, you're like, come on. There's something gay between these two. Now, there are plenty more Gundam movies and shows that explore a broader range of men connecting with one another. Some are heavier on the gay subtext, as with Gundam Wing, and some are tongue-in-cheek absurd, like G Gundam. But it is comforting to know that Mobile Suit Gundam launched through a movie trilogy that was about far more than just gritty space battles with giant robots. Although the giant robots are pretty damn cool.
Now, a crew of orphans and rejects will change the face of history or die trying. You're mine. Tsunami is proud to present the most groundbreaking anime saga of all time.